disappear, like not over years or months or even hours, but in 10 minutes flat, 10 minutes between the life you knew and the one you can't come back from. I used to think endings came slowly. Turns out they come screaming out of the sky, and they don't. Hey, if you're hearing this, that means something about the signal held up. My name doesn't matter right now, not yet. What matters is what I saw, what I felt, and what I survived. Welcome to PodPulse House. This is 10 Minutes to Ash, and this is the story of the day the sky exhaled, and the world held its breath. It started with a vibration, not the kind that shakes the ground and sends people running, not that obvious. No, this was quieter, finer, like the floor beneath me was humming to itself in a language just shy of human hearing. I was standing at the bottom of the Lexington 63rd Street station, half awake, the concrete walls sweating with cold and the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like they were sick of being alive. I was supposed to be on my way to work, normal day. Jacket zipped halfway, earbuds dead, phone battery at 9%, and then the emergency alert hit every screen. Phones lit up. Screens in the corners of the station glitched, froze, and then flickered with a bold red warning. Impact event detected. Estimated time to strike 10 minutes. 10 minutes. That's all the warning they gave us. Not hours, not days. 10. You don't scream in moments like that. Your body doesn't know how. It's not built for it. Your mind just stalls out. I remember this weird calm, like the kind that hits right before a car crash, where time goes thick and the world sounds like it's underwater. I checked my phone again, thinking maybe it was some drill or one of those test alerts. But it wasn't just me. Everyone's devices were lighting up. Live feeds exploded online, Twitter fell apart in real time, and someone, somewhere, had already started streaming their own countdown. People above ground probably ran for their cars, hugged loved ones, looked up at the sky and begged something invisible to stop it. But I was underground. No sky. No sun. Just miles of tunnel and steel wrapped around me like the bones of a long dead beast. And then, the strangest part, nothing. No sound, no shaking, no explosion overhead. Just the low groan of the ventilation fans and the static hum of lights that somehow kept glowing. I remember glancing up at the ceiling, half expecting to see it crack open, but the concrete didn't budge. My phone said 9:51, then 9:30, then 8:05. Seconds slipping like water through your fingers, and all I could think about standing there beneath the earth was how ridiculous it all was. That this was how it was going to go. No big finale, no Hollywood explosion, just a train station, the smell of stale metal, and the weight of people holding their breath all at once. But here's where it gets. Right around the 6-minute mark, the power dipped, not like a blackout. The lights stayed on, but they flickered, in rhythm, like they were pulsing to a beat I couldn't quite catch. And then, the boards, the LED signs that usually showed train delays and arrival times, those started glitching too. I stared at one as it scrolled nonsense characters like corrupted code, and then it froze, on a message I've never been able to forget. It just said, "Prepare." I don't know how long I stood there staring. I didn't move. I didn't run. What was the point? You can't outrun the sky. You can't outpray physics. If something that big was coming down, it was already over. But deep down, under the panic, under the weight of knowing this was the end, I felt something else, something colder, like whatever was coming wasn't natural. And that thought stuck to me. It never left. Because a rock from space doesn't give you a warning. It doesn't change its speed. It doesn't make electrical systems glitch. But something intelligent might. Something that didn't come to crash, but to test. At exactly the 0 mark, nothing happened. No impact, no rumble, no wave of heat or blinding light, just stillness. And that's when I felt it, the real beginning. Not the end everyone expected. That was just the distraction. The real story started in that silence, in that still air underground, in the slow realization that we weren't just spared, we were chosen. And I've been trying to understand why ever since. You know how they say silence is peaceful? That's a lie. The wrong kind of silence can tear you apart. Not the quiet of a calm night or an empty room. I'm talking about the silence after a clock runs out and nothing happens. After the final second ticks down and the world just keeps breathing. That's the silence I heard, standing there in that concrete tomb while the sky, the earth, and everything I understood about danger stayed still. It should have been relief. I should have fallen to my knees or cried or called someone, but I didn't, because something in that stillness felt wrong. It felt staged. I remember glancing around that station, pretending I was just another person trying to make sense of a false alarm. But inside, I was already peeling the world back, trying to see the strings. Because if that was a drill, it was a hell of a one. And if it wasn't, then what the hell had just passed over our heads without a sound? My phone was still clinging to life at 4%, but data was sluggish, like everything was jammed. Still, something told me to keep watching, to keep digging, even as most people around me stared up like the emergency was over. But the emergency wasn't over, it had just changed shape. I remember the moment it shifted, about 5 minutes after 0. My phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't the system alert. It was a push notification from a forgotten app I only used to follow odd science forums. It linked to a live stream. I should have swiped it away, should have saved my battery. But something in the preview image made my chest tighten. It was a man, alone in a dark control room, facing a camera like he wasn't supposed to be broadcasting. Behind him, screens, dials, charts that meant nothing to me except one, a trajectory graph. And it didn't show an arc of descent, it showed a correction. A smooth, deliberate change of course just before impact. I tapped in. The stream was grainy, barely holding signal, but I saw enough. The man didn't speak. He just pointed behind him, and the camera caught it, a magnified view of the object. It was massive, all right, but it wasn't spinning. It wasn't tumbling like debris from space should. It was steady, stable, as if it had gyroscopes or wings. I could almost swear I saw light patterns ripple across its surface like thermal skin. Then, right as the stream began to clear up, the feed cut, like someone reached down and yanked it from the internet in real time, just static. And then, not even that. My phone died in my hand. That was the emotional crack, right there. Not the countdown, not the panic, but the sound of my phone fading to black, the last tether to the outside world snapping. Not because I needed connection, but because whatever was controlling that object didn't want me or anyone else to keep watching. I wasn't scared of dying anymore. I was scared of not knowing what had just passed over our heads without fire, without sound, without a trace. I looked back up at the LED board above the platform, half expecting it to be normal again, but it was still frozen on that single word, prepare. I kept staring at it, longer than I cared to admit. My brain tried to rewrite it, make it into something innocent, a misprint, a system error. But I knew better. That was a message, not just to me, to anyone paying attention. And maybe you think I'm reading into it too much. Maybe you think this is grief talking, trauma, survivor's guilt, whatever label you want to stick on it. But I've spent years trying to pull the pieces together, and the more I dig, the more I realize that 10 minutes wasn't just a warning, it was a window, a time frame, a measure of how long it takes for us to fall apart, to say goodbye, to show our flaws in full display. Because what followed that countdown wasn't chaos, it was confession. Everywhere, on every network, every platform, people were pouring their souls out, a flood of secrets, guilt, love, apologies. It's like the whole world decided to bleed out on camera. I couldn't watch it all, no one could, but someone might have been listening, cataloging, measuring. And I haven't forgotten what I saw just before my screen died, how the object paused, just briefly, like it was watching too, like it was collecting. And now when I think back to that live stream and the man who didn't speak, I wonder if he even had time to. I wonder if he was silenced the moment he pointed, because silence is never empty. Not this kind, not anymore. That was the day I stopped trusting the quiet. You know what nobody tells you about surviving the end of the world? That survival doesn't feel like a miracle. It feels like guilt soaked into your bones. Like waking up in someone else's life where the rules are different now, but you're still pretending the old ones apply. It's not joy, it's suspicion. It's walking out of that underground station with sunlight on your face, and this terrible question in your chest, why am I still here? Because nothing felt right after that. Not the air, not the way people talked, not even gravity. It was like the world hadn't ended, but had definitely changed direction. I left the station slowly, as if something was going to stop me. My phone was dead. No trains came, and above ground everything looked untouched. No fireball, no crater, just traffic lights blinking like any other day. But it wasn't any other day. You could feel it in the way people moved. Some were laughing like they'd dodged a bullet. Others were filming themselves crying, begging forgiveness, thanking fate or God or whatever they thought had spared them. But me, I couldn't feel lucky. Not after what I saw. Not after the way the object, whatever it was, had corrected itself like it chose not to hit. And that word, prepare. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't some system glitch or hacker prank. It was a directive, a statement with intent. But it wasn't until 2 days later that I found the piece that made the silence truly horrifying. I hadn't slept much, just bounced between old servers, archived posts, old shortwave frequencies, the kind most people forgot even existed. I was looking for anything, any clue, any scientific data, any hidden chatter. I ended up finding something on a buried forum, one of those digital bunkers built by hobbyists and ex-government types with usernames longer than your patience. A thread simply titled, Beneath. It described a pattern, not in the stars, not in the sky, but underground, beneath major cities, beneath us. Seismic sensors had registered a series of micro-vibrations in the hours before the asteroid event. They were too subtle for humans to feel, but sensitive instruments picked them up. Not earthquakes, not tectonic shifts. These weren't natural. They followed a rhythm, perfectly spaced pulses, spaced across the globe like sonar, like something buried deep beneath our feet was responding, or listened. I remember sitting there staring at the waveform someone had posted, a repeating beat, regular, almost intelligent. One of the posters, a physics grad from Melbourne, judging by his old profile, suggested it resembled encoded communication, not random seismic chatter, but a handshake, a ping, like when you boot a server and it reaches out to make contact with something else, not up, but down. He was laughed off the thread by others, told he was chasing ghosts, but that waveform stuck with me. I downloaded it, played it over and over, and the longer I listened, the more I realized it wasn't just data, it was sound. I hooked it into my software, slowed it, filtered it, ran it through audio conversion tools, and finally, I heard it. Not music, not words, but a frequency so low, so primal, it crawled up the base of your spine and made your skin feel wrong. It sounded like the earth was humming, not from stress or movement, but from thought, like something inside the planet had awakened, recognized what had flown past us, and responded. That's when I remembered that flicker in the train station, the first sign, that gentle pulse in the concrete, like a heartbeat coming from the bedrock. At the time, I thought it was a subway vibration. But what if it wasn't? What if that moment, the countdown, the signal, the fake impact, wasn't just an event, but a test? A synthetic asteroid, a controlled descent, a global signal bouncing back not into the airwaves, but into the Earth itself. Like whatever was out there wasn't looking for humans. It was looking for something older, something that had been sleeping, and maybe still is. Or maybe it woke up when it heard the call. That's the part that gets to me, the emotional fracture. Because suddenly this wasn't about survival anymore. It wasn't about fear of death. It was about a deeper dread that we weren't the ones being targeted, that maybe we were just caught in the middle, like kids in a house built on top of something ancient, and the knocking on the ceiling wasn't for us. It was from below. And you think about all the ancient myths, across cultures, across time, hollow earth, dreaming gods, buried machines. You roll your eyes until one day you see science bending toward myth, until one day a rock from the sky adjusts course, and the earth answers back, not with fire, not with collapse, but with a pulse, a frequency, like that's what keeps me up now. Not the fear of dying in 10 minutes, but the possibility that something under us responded to the thing that flew over us. And that whatever that conversation was, it hasn't stopped. I still have the waveform. I still play it sometimes late at night, volume low, headphones in, and every now and then, I swear it changes. I swear it says something new, like it's still talking, and I'm just waiting for it to start making sense. You know, there's a particular kind of loneliness that comes not from being left behind, but from being the only one who noticed what happened. It's worse than grief. Grief is shared. People light candles, tell stories, hold vigils. But when you're the only one who felt the ground breathe, the only one who saw patterns in chaos and heard voices in static, there's no comfort, no community. There's just this widening gap between you and the rest of the world. You try to bridge it, try to tell someone, write it out, show the data, but their eyes glaze over. They think you're unwell, or worse, they think you're grieving in the wrong way. So eventually you stop trying, you stop talking, you just watch and listen. And that's what I kept doing, listening. After I'd recorded that subterranean frequency, after the fake asteroid incident and the shutdown of that mysterious live stream, I became obsessed, not with survival, not with doomsday prepping or bunkers or stockpiling supplies. I wasn't scared of what was coming anymore. I was scared of what had already been triggered. I started going back through old seismic records, not just recent ones but the historical archives, decades old, even pre-digital. I wasn't looking for earthquakes or volcanic activity. I was searching for those same rhythmic pulses, those micro-vibrations that didn't belong to any known geological event. And I found them, not often, but scattered, like whispers. 1983, under Perth. 1996, near Yellowstone. 2011, deep below the Scottish Highlands. Just 3 or 4 second-long tremors that never made headlines because they didn't hurt anyone. But they matched the pattern. Same frequency, same spacing. And every single one of those anomalies occurred just days after an atmospheric incident, a meteor sighting, a sonic boom, an unidentified object spotted moving against orbital predictions. Not weapons tests. Not military flights, but real phenomena that were brushed aside, cataloged under space debris or natural re-entry. But they weren't natural. Not by a long shot. One of them, the 1996 event in Scotland, lined up with a black triangle sighting. One of those infamous ones, silent and massive, hovering low before disappearing into the clouds. And beneath it, that same pulse in the rock. Almost like the earth itself had flinched. I started going back to that train station every evening, the same one where the warning hit. Lexington 63rd. I'd sit on the platform, no destination, just waiting, listening. And at first, nothing, just trains, feet, announcements. But on the 4th night I felt it again, not through sound but through the soles of my shoes. A low rhythmic vibration, just 2 pulses, then silence. But they weren't from the train tracks. I know what a train feels like. This came from beneath the station, deep, slow, like the heartbeat of something massive, hidden under layers of steel and stone. I stayed there until the last train left and the platforms were empty, just me and the buzz of dying lights. And then I heard it, faint, nearly drowned in the ambient hum, but real, a tone, like the one from the waveform. Only this time it wasn't recorded, it was live, and it was closer. I started bringing a recorder. Not my phone. Something analog, something less likely to be interfered with. I sat there for hours each night. Sometimes there was nothing, but once in a while I'd catch it, a faint tonal pattern that shifted ever so slightly like it was adapting. And when I layered all those samples together and filtered the noise, the result chilled me to my core. The tones weren't random. They formed a structure, sequences that mirrored known linguistic patterns, repetitions, spacing, pauses. Like a language trying to learn ours by mimicking rhythm before meaning. And that's when it hit me, really hit me, in a way that made my stomach turn and my knees weak. Whatever had flown past us that day, whatever had paused above our atmosphere, whatever had chosen not to strike, it hadn't just been watching us, it had been speaking to something below us. And now they were talking, exchanging signals, pulses, learning. It wasn't an invasion. It wasn't a countdown to destruction, it was a handshake, a reunion, a reconnection. And I started wondering, what if that asteroid wasn't meant to destroy Earth at all? What if it was never a weapon but a key, something that unlocked a part of this planet that had been dormant for millennia. Or worse, what if the key had awakened something that was never meant to wake again? And maybe, just maybe, the real threat isn't from space. It's from what's already inside our Earth, something that's been here long before us, watching, waiting, dreaming in stone. That's the emotional twist that caught me off guard. Because for all my obsession with data and logic, for all my deep dives into code and seismic records, nothing prepared me for the feeling that crept into my chest as I played that layered tone over and over again. It wasn't fear, it was recognition. Something deep in me, something ancient, something buried in DNA we don't fully understand, responded to that sound like a tuning fork, like an echo in bone. And I realized then, this isn't just a story about survival. This isn't just a mystery to be solved. This is a warning. One etched into the concrete of our cities, whispered through the bedrock of continents, disguised as silence beneath our feet. And the worst part? I don't think we were the first civilization to hear it. I used to think that history was something we left behind, that we built over it, paved it, painted it with convenience and Wi-Fi signals in coffee shops until it disappeared. But the older I get, the more I understand that we don't bury history. It buries us. And lately I can't stop wondering how many layers down our truth really goes. Because once I started pulling at the threads left behind after the sky refused to kill us, I found something older than anything I ever studied in school. Something we're not meant to remember. Something the world has deliberately forgotten. After the pulses in the concrete and the tones from beneath the station, I couldn't sleep. I started dreaming in static, hearing frequencies in everything. The hum of the fridge, the air conditioning vents, the slow chug of a passing train. I'd wake up gasping, convinced I'd heard words in the white noise. It wasn't just obsession anymore. It was something else, like a calling, and I followed it. I dug into old geological surveys, declassified military records, ancient land use documents from 3 continents, and buried in the archives of a long-forgotten British civil engineering firm from the 1930s, I found it, a reference to something called subsurface alignment, grid 7D. No further explanation, no context, just a coded reference on a city planning document, with a handwritten note next to it, not for civilian access. Aligns with tremor points. That phrase sent ice down my spine. I traced it to a short-lived geological research unit in Canberra that was shut down without explanation in 1971. Their research never made it to publication, but one of their field notebooks did, through a private estate sale decades later. It was a mess. Water damage, illegible scrawl, coffee stains. But some of it was clear enough. They were studying deep seismic echoes beneath Australia, unusual harmonic vibrations that didn't match tectonic activity. They called them whispers in the plate. The notebook described several of these echolocations, or nodes, and included hand-drawn maps connecting them by straight lines that defied the curvature of the Earth. When the nodes were plotted, they formed a massive geometric pattern, stretched across continents, like something carved not for humans to see, but for the planet to feel. At first I thought it was just nonsense. People draw shapes in maps all the time, but I couldn't ignore the correlation. Those nodes aligned with the exact locations I'd already flagged for micro-vibrations. The one under Lexington 63rd, the one beneath the Scottish Highlands, the tremor near Perth. And then it hit me. These weren't random. These sites weren't just geological quirks. They were pressure points, switches, possibly even sensors. And whoever, whatever, designed them had done so long before our civilization learned to write, before we ever struck flint against stone. Someone, or something, had mapped the Earth from within. That's the moment the fear turned to awe. Not the Hollywood kind, not the exciting, goosebumps-inspiring sort. No, this was the kind of awe that leaves you cold and quiet, the kind that reminds you how fragile your little place in the world really is. Like standing at the edge of a dark ocean and realizing it goes on forever, and you're not even a ripple. I found more references in old U.S. Geological Survey logs, field notes from the 1950s buried deep in archived boxes never digitized. There were mentions of resonant anomalies found during post-war tunnel construction in Nevada, where drilling equipment inexplicably failed, not because of rock hardness, but because of feedback, vibrations in the rock that overloaded the equipment before it even touched the stone. One engineer wrote in a side note that the stone sang back, his words, not mine. In the UK, during the Channel Tunnel project, there were rumors, quiet ones, that certain segments had to be rerouted after workers complained of headaches, nausea, and vivid auditory hallucinations. Nothing ever made it to the public, but a local geology professor published an obscure paper shortly after, suggesting there were ancient artificial nodes beneath the seabed. The paper was pulled, the professor discredited, and no one ever talked about it again. So here I was, sitting on a mountain of fragmented evidence, ignored, discredited, or buried by time, and yet every piece pointed to the same conclusion. The world, our world, is not as solid or silent as we think. Beneath our feet, beyond the reach of drills and satellites, something has been patiently waiting, or maybe it's always been watching. And the so-called asteroid, that wasn't a fluke. It was the reactivation of a system, a key in a lock, a whisper across a forgotten grid, and it didn't need to speak through the air. It spoke through stone. That's what haunts me now. Not the possibility that we're being watched, but the slow realization that we are not the primary occupants of this planet, that we might just be tenants living above machinery we don't understand, consciousness we can't detect, intelligence so old it has fused with the planet itself, something that didn't need to build skyscrapers or write books because it etched its thoughts into tectonic plates, into the slow turning of the crust, into the rumble of fault lines. It's funny. We always assumed aliens would come from the stars, shining lights descending in metallic ships. But what if they were already here, not above us, but below? What if the greatest intelligence on or in Earth doesn't live in space, but has slumbered in silence, waiting for a signal from the stars? A signal it finally received. And what breaks me, truly breaks me, is thinking about how long we've ignored the signs. Every unexplained tremor, every malfunction in deep drilling, every ancient map carved with symbols we dismissed as superstition. Maybe it was never superstition. Maybe it was survival. Maybe those before us knew and tried to leave a warning before they were swallowed by the very earth they walked on. And now it's starting again. I always used to think that silence was safe, that when the world goes quiet, when the noise settles and all you're left with is your own heartbeat, that somehow meant peace. But that was before I understood what silence really is. It's not empty. It's not the absence of sound. It's the presence of everything that chooses not to speak. And deep underground, beneath the layers of steel and soil and stone, silence isn't quiet. It's watching. It's listening. And sometimes, it's speaking back. After I traced those ancient pressure points, the nodes, the grid lines, the resonant anomalies, I couldn't shake the idea that something beneath us had finally woken up. Not like a creature, not with claws and teeth, but with something worse, intention, design, purpose that outlives the rise and fall of civilizations. And as I dug deeper, both literally and metaphorically, it all started converging on one thing, a place that had no name on modern maps, but was once whispered about in stories too old to trace, somewhere in the Northern Territory, buried under layers of desert, red rock, and time itself. A place where even local legends don't walk. They circle it. They avoid it. Because they know what's buried there isn't just a myth. It's a memory, a scar. I shouldn't have gone looking. I know that now. But the human brain isn't built for unanswered questions. Curiosity isn't harmless. It's a hunger that consumes caution. And so I chartered a trip. Private, quiet, off the books. I didn't want a team. I didn't want noise. Just me, a pack, and equipment that could handle the heat. I knew what I was walking into, or at least I thought I did. What I didn't realize was how little I understood about the ground I was standing on. There's a moment, somewhere between hiking for hours and the moment your GPS starts to flicker, where you feel the edge of something. Not a cliff, not a map border, but a threshold. Like the land itself is different. Like it's aware of you. That's what it felt like when I crossed into that zone. Dry wind, still air. And then the vibration. It wasn't seismic, not like a quake or even a tremor. It was slow, deliberate, more like a resonance, like the land was being played like an instrument, a deep subsonic tone that rattled the fillings in my teeth. I followed it deeper into the basin, until I found what I wasn't supposed to find, a cave entrance, almost perfectly circular, carved not by erosion but by geometry. The stone around it wasn't just weathered, it was scorched, as if from heat so old it had fused the grains together into glass. I stepped inside, light low, recorder on, breath held. The deeper I went, the less the equipment worked. First the GPS, then the barometer, then the recorder just stopped flashing. But I kept moving, driven by something I can't quite explain. Maybe madness, maybe instinct, or maybe something else. The walls of the cave started showing marks, not carvings, not paintings, but indentations in impossible patterns. Spirals made of perfect angles, like someone had folded geometry into the stone, not with tools but with force. They pulsed faintly, not with light, not with color, but with presence, like they were remembering something, or someone. And then came the sound. At first it was just in the periphery, something your ears catch but your mind refuses to interpret. A whistle through bone, a tone that didn't echo but instead absorbed. It moved through me, and with it came visions. Not dreams, not hallucinations, but memory fragments that didn't belong to me. Cities that weren't ours. Skies with more than one sun. Oceans the color of rust. And machines. Living machines not built but grown. They moved like thoughts, bending space around them. And beneath them, us. Or something that looked like us. Fragile, confused, watching them, worshipping them, or maybe hiding. I dropped to my knees. Not out of awe, not out of fear, but because I couldn't stand. The cave wasn't just a space, it was a transmitter, and I wasn't the observer anymore. I was the receiver. The echoes below weren't from earthquakes or construction or natural resonance. They were memories, transmitted through the stone itself, old ones. From a time before language, from a civilization that was either destroyed or shed its skin, and left itself behind. Buried in rock like code in a hard drive, waiting to be reactivated. And that's when the emotional weight really hit me. Because all this time, I thought we were the first, the peak, the evolution. But what if we're just a glitch in someone else's memory, a reset, a recursion? And this event, this asteroid, was never meant to end us. It was meant to awaken us, or replace us, or maybe even remind us of what we were before we forgot. That's the part that hurt the most. The idea that maybe we knew this once, that buried somewhere in our DNA, in the gaps between base pairs, is the faint echo of what we used to be. Before fear, before time, when we were still connected. When I finally crawled out of that cave, the sky had changed. No clouds, no stars, just a strange haze that shimmered at the horizon like heat off asphalt. My ears rang for hours, not with tinnitus, but with the residual hum of those frequencies. So precise, so perfectly tuned they made music sound like static. And even now, days later, I still feel it. In my chest, in the back of my eyes. A pressure, like something is building beneath us, rising again. This isn't about doomsday anymore. This isn't about survival. It's about remembrance. About the echoes we buried so deep we forgot they were ever there. And now, one by one, they're coming back. Through stone, through sound, through silence, not to destroy us, but to finish what we left undone. You ever feel like you're being watched, but not with eyes? Not by a person, not even by a thing, but by the air itself, by the angles of a room, the way a hallway curves, or the weight and the silence just before your own breath echoes back at you. That's how it started, quietly, uneventfully. A hum under everything. After I got back from the cave, the one in the Northern Territory, I thought the worst was over. I told myself it was just residual anxiety, maybe dehydration, maybe hypoxia from spending too long underground. But that hum, it followed me, into my house, into my sleep, and soon into my body. I tried to ignore it at first, I really did. Brushed it off like the flu or jet lag. My phone started behaving oddly, opening apps on its own, flickering just before I'd touched the screen. I caught it picking up phantom calls. No caller ID, no ringtone, just a vibration, and then nothing. My radio scanner, which I'd kept purely out of old habit, started catching stray bursts of audio, Short, clipped sequences of static and tone. Not random. No, there was pattern in it. Pulse gaps measured to the millisecond. Variations in pitch too precise to be natural. I tried recording it, but the files always corrupted. Only when I used analog tape, good old-fashioned cassette, did the signal remain intact. It played like a metronome stitched with whispers. I couldn't make out words. Not exactly. It wasn't in any language I recognized. No Spanish, no French, nothing binary or Morse. But it wasn't noise either. The rhythm was intentional, and deep down I didn't need a translation. I could feel what it meant. It felt like a countdown. A message meant not for the ears, but for the bone. And that's when my skin changed. Not visibly, not like some sci-fi mutation, but it started reacting. Certain spots became warm when I was near the signal. A tingling sensation ran down the inside of my arms, especially near concrete foundations. In the evenings, when everything went still, I'd feel the subtle buzz across the back of my neck, like being caught in a field of static electricity. It wasn't painful, just there, like the body was finally being used for what it was made for, a receiver, a living antenna. I know how insane that sounds. I'd have laughed too once. But your mind changes when your body starts answering questions you didn't ask. I ran a full body scan. No illness, no tumors, no structural abnormalities. But the MRI lit up in strange ways. Regions of my brain, ones normally dormant in adults, showed activity. The pineal gland, the parietal lobe, even parts of my inner ear began to respond to ultra-low frequencies. My balance would sometimes flicker in perfectly silent rooms. It felt like I was tuning into a station no one else could hear. Not hallucinations, not delusions, just reception. I started mapping it. Every place the hum was strongest, I logged GPS coordinates. From Brooklyn to Birmingham to Brisbane, they formed not a straight line, but a spiral. A slow, logarithmic spiral extending outwards from what I later calculated to be the impact site of the so-called asteroid. Except there was no crater, no radiation, no debris, just a massive underground tremor that lasted precisely 33 seconds. Long enough to shift a few seismographs, short enough to be forgotten by the news cycle, but not by the ground. The ground remembered, and it passed that memory through signal. Here's the part that really shattered me. I wasn't the only one hearing it. I found old naval reports from the US and UK, submarine logs marked classified but later released under obscure freedom of information loopholes. They described acoustic disturbances beneath the Pacific and Indian Oceans, not sonar, not enemy vessels, something older, something embedded in the seabed itself. Patterns of resonance so mathematically perfect they defied natural occurrence. One British sub-commander wrote, "It's as if the ocean floor is alive and trying to speak, and we ignored it, or worse, we buried it." And then came the lights, faint ones, not in the sky, underground. I saw them flare just beneath the floor of an abandoned railway station in Manchester, like phosphorescence but geometric, squares within circles, fading as quickly as they appeared. I don't know if they were visible to the naked eye or if they only appeared in the ultraviolet lens I'd started carrying, but they matched the exact pattern I saw in the Australian cave, and that's when I knew the signals weren't from nowhere. They were from beneath, and they weren't new, they were remembered. I started to wonder if the asteroid wasn't an object at all, but a trigger, an ignition key dropped from orbit to reawaken whatever's buried beneath our cities, our deserts, our oceans. A frequency match, a signal pulse timed to the second, and it worked. Because these signals, they're spreading now, faster, louder. Places that were silent before have begun to hum. Infrastructure's glitching. Satellites lose calibration over certain zones. Animals migrate in impossible directions. Birds circle buildings as if confused. Dogs howl at places where nothing moves. But the worst part is this: I can hear it now without equipment. It's in my teeth, in my spine. At night it vibrates through the mattress, pulsing like a heartbeat that's not my own, a beat coming from the ground, calling to something or someone, and whatever it is, it's been waiting for this moment longer than our species has existed. I know how this sounds. I've listened back to my own words and questioned myself, my sanity, my grip on the world. But every time I try to dismiss it, the signal finds me again. A whisper in the radio, a flicker on the screen, a dream that leaves ash on my sheets. There are no more coincidences, only connections. And if this signal was never meant for us, the question we should be asking is, who or what is finally waking up to hear it? It's funny how life seems to collapse in on itself when you're on the edge of a revelation. You think you're prepared for the truth. You think you're ready to face it, but nothing prepares you for that moment when everything you believed in starts to crumble and everything you thought was reality suddenly bends. Like a thunderstorm breaking open the sky, the instant between the flash and the thunder, the moment of disbelief, the moment before everything becomes clear, and then all at once you can see the invisible. You can see everything. I wish I could tell you that I had a warning before the power grid went down, that it was gradual, that I had a sense of the impending collapse, some alarm bell ringing in the back of my mind, but the truth is it happened so fast, I thought I just blinked. One moment, I was sitting in my dimly lit office, surrounded by monitors, papers scattered with notes and coordinates, trying to make sense of it all, and the next, the lights flickered. A brief pulse of static came from the speakers, and the hum I had become so familiar with started to shift in tone, as if it was aligning itself to a deeper frequency, one I wasn't ready for. And then, nothing. Complete blackness, not just in the room but across the entire city. It wasn't a power surge, it wasn't a storm, it was something else entirely. A complete, systematic failure, like someone had pulled the plug on the world without warning. And it wasn't just me. No, I soon realized that all over the world cities were plunging into the same kind of darkness. Reports came in from Sydney, Manchester, Chicago, New Delhi, power grids down, entire systems failing, one after another. Entire regions were left without communication, without control. Even the satellites I relied on, those that I had been tracking with such precision, went silent. And in the midst of all this chaos, one thing stood out like a neon sign in the darkness: the black field. Now, I'm sure you're thinking it's some kind of metaphor, some poetic name for an event that's yet to be explained. But it's not. The black field is real. It's a place, one that's impossible to trace on any map. It's an area that spans across multiple continents, a patchwork of anomalies that extends across the surface of the Earth, seemingly growing wider as the days go on. If you look at it from above, from any satellite, you'd never know it was there. To the untrained eye, it's just a patch of land, a cluster of empty space that doesn't quite match the usual geological patterns. But when you get close enough, when you get too close, you start to feel it. The air becomes dense. The electromagnetic field goes haywire. And worst of all, the ground itself shifts. You can't see it, but you can feel it. A subtle, underlying vibration, a constant hum that's somehow both present and completely invisible. I first encountered the black field during my research in the outback, near the border of Western Australia. At first, it was just a feeling, like something pressing down on the back of my mind, an itching sensation that made the hair on my neck stand up. I thought it was just the isolation of the desert, the silence that makes your senses go haywire. But then it started happening more frequently. In my office, at my desk, in the middle of the night, the hum would come, faint at first, then louder, almost like an incoming wave, a ripple in the atmosphere, an invisible force gathering, preparing for something. And when I looked at my maps, at the coordinates I'd been tracking, I began to notice a disturbing pattern. It was shifting. The black field wasn't stationary. It was expanding, moving, spreading, like the pulse of a dormant giant stirring beneath the earth. The more I tracked it, the more it seemed to envelop areas of great significance, places where ancient structures had once stood, or where long-forgotten secrets were buried. And then, after the blackout, it became clear. The black field wasn't just there. It was waking up. The energy that had lain dormant for so long, waiting beneath the surface, was being awakened by something, or someone. And this is where the truth starts to get unsettling. The field isn't natural. It's not a geological formation. It's not a freak occurrence of nature or a cosmic accident. The black field is intentional, a deliberate creation, one that's been there far longer than our understanding of human history. I know how that sounds, but stay with me. I first stumbled upon it in historical archives, obscure documents dating back centuries. Some referred to it as a power zone, others as the heart of silence. Even ancient texts mentioned the idea of a darkening field that could erase sound, sight, and thought. But in every record, one thing was constant. The field was tied to the rise and fall of civilizations, always appearing at the edges of something monumental, a shift, a change, and it always came with a price. I started to connect the dots between the field's expansion and the strange signals I had been receiving. It wasn't just the hum anymore. It was the blackness, the absence, a space devoid of energy, where even light seemed reluctant to penetrate. It wasn't merely the failure of systems, it was the erasure of them. Systems, memories, people, places, all of it seemed to vanish, or at least shift, as though reality itself was being rewritten. I couldn't explain how it worked, but the connections were becoming impossible to ignore. The worst part? The field is still expanding. I can't tell you how I know this, but I do. Every night I hear it. That same hum, that same vibration, now more pronounced, more insistent. It's coming from below, from deep beneath the surface, as if something is pushing upwards, clawing its way through the layers of rock, dirt, and time itself. It's almost as though the black field is preparing to break through to the surface, to make its presence known on a global scale. And when it does, there's no telling what will be left. No telling how much of the world we once knew will remain. I keep thinking back to the reports, the ones I found about the strange frequencies picked up by submarines in the Pacific and Indian Oceans, the ones that had been marked as unexplained. They weren't just underwater tremors or signals from unknown sources. No, these were connected. They were a warning, a precursor to the chaos that's now unfolding. And as the field spreads, as the blackout continues, I can't shake the feeling that whatever is buried beneath us, whatever has been dormant for so long, is preparing for something. Something that no one is ready for. The black field isn't just a place, it's a presence, a waiting force that has been here far longer than we realize. And now, as it spreads and stretches across the globe, it's calling out, whether we want to hear it or not. There are moments in your life when everything that once seemed solid, the ground beneath your feet, the sky above your head, begins to feel like smoke. Just wisps of illusion that fade when you try to hold on. I don't think I realized how fragile my understanding of reality was until I stood in the middle of what they called the clearing in the black field. I had expected something tangible, something I could name, some sort of truth I could grasp, like a rock or an artifact, or even a sudden eruption that would bring clarity. But the truth I found there wasn't something I could touch. It wasn't a thing. It was a feeling, a shift, a moment in time where the universe itself seemed to pause, holding its breath. What I'm telling you might sound impossible, but I swear to you, every part of it is true. There's something wrong with the sky. Not just the sky in the literal sense, no. I mean the sky in the way we've always understood it. A boundary, a limit between us and the unknown, the thing that has defined human existence for millennia. And now, it's all broken. It started when I crossed into the field, deeper than I'd ever gone before. The air was heavier there, thick with the same hum that had been following me for so long. The ground underfoot felt unstable, as if it was shifting in slow, imperceptible waves. But the real shock came when I looked up. The sky, our sky, the one we've known our entire lives, wasn't real. It wasn't blue. It wasn't even gray or black. It was something else, a flat, unnatural color, like a painted backdrop or a photograph that had been overexposed, too saturated to see through. It had no depth, no movement. It was like staring at the surface of a pond that hadn't been disturbed for centuries. Just that stagnant, oppressive stillness. At first I thought it was the lack of sun, but when I looked closer I realized the sky wasn't lacking anything. It was false, a construct, a veil. It was like a membrane separating this world from something else, something ancient, something beyond human comprehension. At the same time, the landscape itself began to warp. The trees around me twisted into unnatural shapes, as if their roots were pulling them toward the sky. The ground was a mix of rock and dirt, but it had a slickness to it, like it was coated in something that resisted gravity. It didn't feel like the earth I had known. It felt like I had stepped into the middle of some strange experiment, some place where the laws of physics didn't apply. It was like looking into the heart of a simulation that had gone wrong. that had lost its way. I don't know how long I was out there, but time seemed to stretch. The hum was louder now, closer. It felt like the earth itself was breathing, pulling in and pushing out air in steady rhythm. It wasn't a sound you could ignore. It was in the air, in your skin, in the tips of your fingers. I tried to take a step forward, but it was like moving through water. Every step felt sluggish, forced, like I was walking through something far thicker than air. I don't know why I stayed so long, why I didn't run when I had the chance. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was fear, maybe I was just waiting for something to happen. And then it did. It started slowly at first, a flicker in the horizon, a change in the air. The sky, that false thing above me, began to crack. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I could see it. The lines, thin as spider silk, splitting the sky open, like the seams of an old garment giving way to the tension beneath. It wasn't lightning. It wasn't storm clouds. No, this was different. It was as if the sky itself was a construct, a false sky, and now it was tearing, revealing what was behind it. And then I saw them. At first I thought they were clouds, but they weren't. They were shapes, dark, shifting shapes, moving across the cracks in the sky, like shadows too large to fit inside the world. They were like smoke, but solid, like something tangible, something that had weight. And the moment I saw them, I knew. I knew it wasn't just the sky that was broken. The whole damn world was broken. These things that moved through the cracks weren't from this world. They didn't belong here. I tried to look away, but I couldn't. It was like being hypnotized, forced to watch as the sky ripped open and let loose these creatures, if you can even call them that. They were like shadows at first, but as the cracks spread, I saw them more clearly. They were tall, thin, with bodies that seemed to shimmer and distort like smoke. Their faces, if you could call them faces, were hollow, empty, black voids, like eyes that had never seen light. They moved without sound, their forms folding and unfolding like some impossible geometry, something that defied nature. And that's when I understood. The graves were already here. There were no bodies, no ruins, no relics or fossils. But the graves were beneath the field, beneath the false sky, buried, forgotten. And whatever those things were, they weren't just watchers. They were the keepers. They were the guardians of whatever had been sealed away under the earth, beneath the field, beneath the broken sky. The hum wasn't just some strange noise. It was a signal, a calling. The field, the black field. It wasn't a random anomaly. It was a graveyard, a place where something had been locked away for eternity. And now it was stirring. It was waking. I remember the moment when everything clicked. The black field, the signals, the hum in the air. It wasn't just a freak event. It wasn't just an asteroid or a cosmic accident. It was intentional. This thing, this place, had been here long before humanity, long before cities, before empires, and now it was calling out. Something ancient, something terrible was finally breaking free, and the sky itself was splitting open to let it out. I could feel it in my chest, deep down. The hum, the vibration, the unmistakable sense that something huge, something far bigger than any of us could comprehend was coming. The kind of truth you can never unknow, the kind of truth that changes everything. The graves, the forgotten ones, they were waking. And whatever they were, whatever it wasn't done with us yet. I don't know what will happen next. I don't know if I can survive this. But I do know one thing. Those graves are real, and we've been living on top of them. And now the reckoning has begun. There's something about a countdown that makes everything seem more real. The seconds feel heavier, don't they? Each one carrying its own weight, its own significance. When you know that time is running out, every tick of the clock becomes like a physical blow, and that's exactly how I felt as the seconds to impact started slipping away. 10 minutes left. That's all we had. It seemed impossible. How could I, have been standing on the brink of an event this monumental and not known? How could we as a species have lived in ignorance for so long, waiting, pretending that everything would be fine when clearly it wouldn't be? And yet, even with everything happening, The blackness, the hum, the collapse of systems, the revelations about the black field and the ancient graves, it still felt like the world was in denial. I was in denial. A part of me couldn't accept it. We were all still clinging to the illusion of control, like survivors desperately trying to keep their footing on the edge of an abyss. It's strange, isn't it? The way we ignore the signs until the very last second, until the clock is almost out, until we can hear the breath of the end on the back of our necks. 10 minutes. That's all it took for everything to change. It was about halfway through those last 10 minutes when I realized something that made my heart freeze. The asteroid, the thing we thought was heading for Earth, wasn't natural. I didn't know how I knew it. Whether it was the way it had suddenly appeared in the sky, the way it had accelerated toward us, or the way it felt as though it wasn't just an inanimate object hurtling toward us, but something that had intention. No, this wasn't some cosmic rock. This wasn't a fluke of nature. This was something crafted, something purposeful. As I ran through the data again, I began to make the connections. The asteroid's path, its speed, its composition, it didn't match anything we knew about space phenomena. Nothing in the records, nothing in the historical charts, nothing in the databases that I had access to. The thing that was coming for us was no accident. It was designed. It was aimed. And now that I understood that, I couldn't help but wonder who sent it, who or what had made it. Why now? Why us? And what did they want? The seconds were slipping away, and I had no answers. The broadcasts were still coming in, chaotic voices over the radio waves, people panicking, calling out, begging for someone to stop it. Some of them were still trying to make sense of it, trying to reason with the impossible, but there was no time for reasoning. The system was broken. There was no doing something about it. There was no stopping. The moment that countdown hit 0, I knew it. The world wouldn't just change, it would be obliterated. There wouldn't be an Earth left, not like we knew it, not the cities, not the structures, not even the people. It would all be gone, wiped out in one massive instant. But then, just as the countdown reached its final seconds, I heard something on the radio. It wasn't a voice, it wasn't a broadcast, it was a signal, an unfamiliar sound, a tone so low it vibrated through the air, like the sound of the Earth itself groaning under pressure. It wasn't an explosion, it wasn't an impact. No, it was something else entirely. The hum, the vibration. It wasn't coming from the asteroid anymore. It wasn't even coming from the black field. It was coming from deep within the Earth. And just like that, I realized, the asteroid wasn't the end of it. No, it was the beginning. I don't know what happened after that. I don't know if anyone survived. I don't know if I'm even still alive as I record this. But I do know one thing. That asteroid was never meant to destroy the Earth. It wasn't the impact that was important. It wasn't the fiery crash that everyone expected. It was something else, something much darker, something we couldn't possibly comprehend. And now, whatever was beneath the Earth, whatever was hidden beneath that false sky, whatever was lurking in the depths of the black field, it's finally awake. The real reckoning is only just beginning. I don't know what's coming next. But I know this, when the world changes, when it's remade, reshaped into something else, we'll have to face it. We'll have to survive in a world we never thought possible, a world we don't even recognize anymore. And I'll be here, wherever I am, trying to make sense of it all, trying to understand why the Earth trembled and cracked, why the sky split open, and why the hum in the air never stopped. But I can't do it alone. I need your help. If you're hearing this, if you're still here, then you're part of this now. I don't know if we can save this world, but we can learn, we can understand, and maybe, just maybe, we can survive what's coming. Because it's coming. I can feel it in the air, in my bones, in the hum of the world. So if you're still with me, if you want to know what happens next, if you want to know what the real end of this story is, then I need you to stay tuned. This isn't over, not by a long shot. If you're new to PodPulse House, make sure to like and subscribe. Trust me, you're going to want to hear what comes next. And remember, no matter how dark it gets, how far the hum travels, how deep the black field stretches, there's always light at the edge of the storm. The truth might be unsettling, but it's always better than the lies we've been told. Stay strong, stay curious, stay tuned, because this story is far from finished. The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. Eleanor Roosevelt. Good night. and don't stop asking the questions.